New Jersey voters just approved the legalization of cannabis, but not so fast. That was just step one in getting the industry up and running. This is the Issues Watch podcast. Hi, I'm Jeff Kazerman, Vice President of Government Relations at the New Jersey Society of CPAs, and welcome to episode 58. New Jersey voters recently approved a constitutional amendment to legalize adult use cannabis. But that was just step one in allowing cannabis sales to proceed in New Jersey. Steps 2 and step 3 will be the passage of enabling legislation and then the regulatory framework that will be drafted by the Cannabis Regulatory Commission. While the Society never took a position on the issue of legalization, we did draft legislation that has been introduced to help level the playing field for those looking to enter the cannabis marketplace, in particular small businesses, minorities, and women. This legislation calls for New Jersey to decouple from an Internal Revenue Code section that prohibits cannabis businesses from deducting business expenses, which is a heavy financial burden on businesses, and particularly so for small businesses. We have two guests for this episode to help talk us through all these issues. My first is Kevin Hagan. He's a strategic advisor and lobbyist with Princeton Public Affairs Group. Kevin has extensive experience in the governmental and political fields, having served as the CEO for the New Jersey Democratic State Committee, Deputy Chief of Staff to Governor Jim McGreevey, and Chief of Staff to Senate President Stephen Sweeney. Welcome, Kevin.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much for having me, Jeff.
So now that the cannabis ballot question is passed, enabling legislation to implement the legalization of cannabis must be adopted. So there's been a flurry of activity, as I'm sure you know, to draft enabling legislation, which has to cover a lot of issues, some of which have generated a considerable amount of debate in the legislature. Can you tell us what are some of the major items in the enabling legislation and what were or are still the sticking points between the Senate President, Assembly Speaker, and the Governor?
Sure. This is a very interesting time because in the halls of Trenton, we go through this debate on so many pieces of legislation, but because marijuana is such a public debate, everyone is sort of seeing this process play out in the papers and press releases and what have you. So I think that the first and foremost is always sort of the business structure and regulatory scheme around a controlled substance such as marijuana. The biggest issue, I think, was the tax rate and where the compromises would be made and the final tax rate, where that would land and how it would break down. That's the biggest and most debated, but I think the most important issue that has also now come to the forefront is that of social justice and what this legislation will do, not only from a funding mechanism, but also from the perspective of making sure the communities that were affected most by the quote unquote war on drugs and marijuana related arrests, how this legislation can help in those situations and in those communities. And then lastly, it's about the structure and how many licenses, where there'll be. So I think that's really what we're looking at in terms of a debate that continues to go on even today in Trenton.
Do you expect that this enabling legislation will be passed and adopted like by the end of November?
The only thing I can guarantee you is the Giants will not win the Super Bowl this year. It's not necessarily.
Wow, that's pretty easy. Okay.
It's not easy to ever give a time frame for a piece of legislation that is this complicated and really this is most important to so many different communities, both the advocates and those that are against it. I think what you see now is real momentum and commitment to get it done. When you look at, almost 70% of the vote in favor on election day of the referendum to ensure marijuana is legal in New Jersey, I think that there is a commitment on all sides to get this done as soon as possible. The end of November, early December for this to be signed into law, and really working hopefully by January, that's a realistic time frame. But there are still issues being debated right now that obviously are going to need compromise and people to come to the middle and the table to come to that agreement. So November is not out of the question.
Right. From what I've read and from what I think I understand, much of the tax revenue from the cannabis industry will be dedicated to certain programs or groups. And this is all being addressed in the enabling legislation, and it's not finalized yet, as you know. Can you tell us a little bit about this, what they're debating about, where it would go and who it would go to?
Sure. I think first and foremost, this legislation is creating a regulatory commission that will be very similar to the ABC and the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission, but also mirrored on how the State Division of Gaming is also handled. So the first part of the money is going to go towards the funding of that commission and the enactment of the legislation and making sure that the commission is able to function, staff, commissioners, and what have you. The next side is always, obviously, in New Jersey and elsewhere around the country, states are looking for revenue for their general fund. And there has been a debate as to how much of the money should go towards the general fund. That is still open and I think being discussed. The other side of this is law enforcement obviously is going to be charged with ensuring and making communities safe as they do now, obviously with alcohol and driving under the influence. There's a whole number of issues that come with the law enforcement side. So there will be funding that goes to that. But I believe that there is a growing consensus that the majority of these funds should go back to those communities for social justice programs to help folks who have been, impacted by, arrests, impacts of drugs in their communities and what have you. So reentry programs and the like, those are programs that I think will see the majority of this funding at the end of the day.
So this is not going to be a big revenue generator for the general fund. It's not going to help that much with our the budget gaps we're going to have.
I think what I would say about that, Jeff, is that we're looking at a state that is trying to create a new economic engine, if you will, and market. So in the immediacy, there's not going to be a whole lot of revenue there regardless, because the market has to mature. It has to really settle itself in and become an economic engine. It just doesn't happen like the switch of a light switch. So I think there's going to be growing year over year financial investment in all of those areas. And when you look at states like California, Colorado, and some of the others, it really depends on what their tax rate is, how well the market matures and how quickly, as to whether or not this becomes a real financial boom. But I think that the potential is really there.
Oh, well, okay. That's great to know. So I know that the ballot question addressed retail sales, which I believe it would be taxed at the normal sales tax rate. But what about cultivation and wholesale taxes? Were they included in the ballot question, or is that something they're addressing right now?
They were not included in the ballot question. And you are correct. The ballot question would keep the tax at 6.625%, which you know, from a New Jersey perspective, will make New Jersey's tax rate at the sale one of the lowest in the country. But right now, with the enabling legislation, there is debate around how those taxes will be put on the other areas and licenses within the marijuana marketplace. And the latest, but I want to sort of asterisk that, is that it is just the latest. You know, the goal seems to be that the agreement is the lower the per ounce price is for marijuana, the more the commission will be able to tax it per ounce. So it's sort of confusing, but what they're trying to do is ensure that in the beginning of this, that you don't tax the product out of the marketplace. And what folks don't understand is that you are still going to be competing against the illegal market. And if you put too much of a tax on in the beginning, then there's no incentive to not go to the illegal market and purchase this product. So they're trying to create a balance, and there is a breakdown. You know, I'm going to read this so I don't make a mistake. But if the average price of an ounce is over $350, the commission will have the ability to enact a $10 per ounce tax.
Okay.
When and if the per ounce price falls below 250, they can jump that per ounce tax to $30. If it goes below 199 for an average price, they can go to $40 an ounce. And if it falls below 199 and above, if it goes below 199, it could be upwards of $60 per ounce. I think the important part here is that the legislature is giving the power and authority to the commission to be able to, as they monitor and regulate the marketplace, determine at which best tax rate they should put on the per ounce price.
Okay, so that's the commission is they're not making the decision on the rates like you just said, but they're going to be the ones enforcing it and watching it. Is that what you mean?
That is correct. The sales tax will remain what it is at 6.625, but in terms of the cultivation, the commission will have that authority.
Okay. Compared to other states, looking at the market, let's say 2 years from now, do you think that New Jersey, the cannabis companies themselves and consumers will be paying higher taxes than in other states? And I know that may be difficult to answer, especially if they haven't finalized cultivation and wholesale prices. But, you know, do you think we're going to structure our tax system here so that it will be about the same as other states, you know, higher, less? Any sense of that?
Well, I think out of the gate, New Jersey's starting off in a strong position. First and foremost, because New York and Pennsylvania, our closest neighboring states, will not and do not, for the foreseeable future, have a plan to legalize marijuana. So from that perspective, geographically and strategically, we're in a strong position. When you compare the tax rate to states not far from us, Massachusetts, they're at a sales tax rate of 17%.
Wow.
And they allow a 3% sort of local municipal tax. And I'm remiss, I forgot to mention that in New Jersey, we are allowing in this legislation up to a 2% tax for municipalities that choose to do it. But Illinois, for example, they're one of the highest in the nation. Their tax rate is I'm not sure what the floating metrics are, but from 26 to 41%. So you have to look at that structure and realize that New Jersey is putting themselves in a very strong place. And there was a recent article about Hoboken, New Jersey, where when New Jersey allowed sports betting online, that New Jersey actually saw an influx of New Yorkers and out-of-state folks coming in because you had to be geographically in the state to place a bet. So I think that we shouldn't lose sight of the fringe benefits, if you will, to the economy of folks coming into New Jersey from out of state. Hoboken, for example, it's a path ride from New York City.
Right. Yeah.
Great restaurants, great social life. So there are going to be beneficial impacts to communities all throughout the state from this, outside of, but related to the sale and legalization of marijuana.
Well, I never thought of that. Let's say it's 2 or 3 years from now, and like you said, the market has matured more. Any estimate or range on how much you think the state may be bringing in from cannabis taxes?
There are estimates and ranges, and I think that they're very dangerous to tie yourself to, because you're just not sure what the market will set and settle at. But I think that if you look at other states that have done this and have done it successfully, there's an ebb and flow of the finances, but there's really an ebb and flow of the marketplace, because the commission itself is going to have to determine what changes do we need to make. Did we make a mistake here? Should we fix it here? So when you look at that, I think that a safe range is somewhere between $200 million and $500 million. There are administrative sources right now talking about, we're looking at maybe $460 million. I think that range is very safe. But again, it's going to take time to get there. And you don't know, you don't know when the lights come on to this industry. So you're not sure when that clock is going to start ticking in terms of whether or not there's profit coming in or not.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who don't work in the public policy or lobbying area who think January 1st, the day after New Year's, they're just going to go out and find, marijuana in their local 7-Eleven, but that's going to take a while.
It is, and I think you bring up a good point, because there is an expectation by some that today, if you have marijuana, you could go out and you can smoke it in a public place, or that when it becomes legal and there's enabling legislation, that you're going to be able to go to your convenience store and get that. And those are two very important misunderstandings that folks should understand. Is one, currently it is not legal to go smoke in a public place, and two, after this legislation is passed, it's still not going to be legal to go and smoke in a public place. There are going to be certain public designated areas, similar, I think, to what you see in terms of a cigar club or shop now. But you're not going to be able to purchase this, in a convenience store. And that may be never possible, or it may be very far down this road. These are going to be licensed facilities that, very similar to a liquor store that has a regulated license and is controlled by the rules and laws of the state. It's not going to be like going to buy a pack of cigarettes or something like that right now.
Okay. Decriminalization. Now, is that supposed to cover the period between now and January 1st, when I thought it becomes legal? Or is this about purging prior cannabis convictions from individuals, records, so they don't have a criminal conviction on their record?
The goal is both. The question becomes whether or not you can do that in the decriminalization legislation itself. So there is strong support to look back and basically clear and expunge the records of those who have been accused of, have been convicted of possession. And it's a 6 ounce limit that the bill currently has, but it's also going forward so that you want to make sure very clearly that it doesn't matter where you purchased it. that if you have marijuana in your possession and you are not, you don't meet the requirements that they would charge you with intent to sell, that you are not arrested, detained, or what have you. Today, the day of the decriminalization signed into law going forward. So that is not tied to the actual enabling legislation to legalize marijuana. So it's two separate scenarios.
So after the enabling legislation is passed or enacted, the next steps are, as you know, in the hands of the Cannabis Regulatory Commission. What do you see as the major issues that the commission is going to have to be grappling with?
Well, the first issue is obviously looking at it from the global perspective and setting up the marketplace. The good news to that is that they've done this already in terms of the medical marijuana marketplace. So I think the framework and the beginnings of that foundation are there. Starting there, they're going to have to navigate how to transition from just a medical marketplace to a medical and recreational adult use marketplace. So in order to do that, you obviously can't just open up a store and start selling it. The product has to be grown, and it has to be grown in New Jersey. So there's going to be a balance to make sure that in the beginning that the current medical growers will start to shift and begin to grow recreational use product. That's probably the it's not the biggest, the most important, because you need the product. In addition to that, it will be setting up those different tiers of licenses to ensure that it can go through the process and make its way to the marketplace and be ready for the retail point of sale to the public.
And I didn't know it has to be grown in New Jersey to sell it in New Jersey. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, because remember, from a federal perspective, marijuana is still an illegal drug.
That's
so
a good point.
You don't want to be caught crossing state lines with product. That's for sure. Okay.
Very interesting. So how long, and I know this would be a guesstimate, but how long do you think it'll be until the average New Jerseyan can just go into a cannabis store and purchase marijuana?
I think that there are a number of businesses, small and large, that are really ready to start this process. So I think the best case scenario is probably 3 months. The likely scenario is probably 6 to 8 months. But sometimes government doesn't move as fast as we want them to, and it could get into that post 8 months time period. But I think that the best case scenario or most realistic scenario would be that 6 to 8 month range.
Interesting.
And anything before that, I think, is tremendous.
So let's put aside for a moment the political and governmental components of legalization and look at some of the business aspects of the industry. So are there any significant areas in which New Jersey's cannabis industry will differ from those in other states, like in the way that it's structured?
The biggest, there's two main components that I think put us in a strong competitive position, and that one is our tax rate, and that it is lower than most in the country, and certainly our closest neighboring states. And secondly is our location. The reality is New Jersey is in the center of two. I think it's the first and third largest media marketplaces in Philadelphia and New York. We're right in the middle. Neither of them have legalized marijuana for adult use. So I think that puts us strategically placed very well. New Jersey does have an advantage. There's a lot of frustration that this has not already happened. But I can tell you from the research and where I've visited around the country and folks that we've talked to, there is a benefit to not being first. And that is we're learning from what other states have done. There are a lot of lessons in Colorado, a lot of lessons in Oregon, and a lot of lessons in Nevada and California. So I think New Jersey is well positioned to not make some of those mistakes again. It doesn't mean the system's going to be perfect, nor should we expect it to be. But I do believe that we're ready to start this from a very, very strong position, and really focus on the maturing of this marketplace so that it can become that economic engine that everybody hopes it will be.
Right.
And that's not just about sale, right? That's really about what it takes to grow this and how many people are going to be employed in that process, what it takes to get it from the grow, cultivation, and then to the retailer. Those are real jobs. And there's a whole bunch of other areas here that are important. There's a security component. They talk about seed to sale, making sure that legal marijuana product isn't finding its way to the illegal marketplace. So there's all those types of components. And then we talked a little bit about the Hoboken scenario, but really what that impact will be in a positive way for some of these communities throughout New Jersey. And I think you're going to see a large push to show how to entice businesses into communities that have been, ravaged by the arrests and an illegal marketplace of marijuana. So, I think we see it all the time. If you have a downtown that, whether it's vibrant or not, you put a new lively restaurant, bar, whatever it is, people go to it, and everybody benefits from that. So I think that's really what the ultimate goal here is, to see not only that the marijuana marketplace matures, grows, and becomes that engine, but really that engine spreads out positive economic influences to other businesses around.
Yes, it could help restaurants and bars, especially, which they'll need after being hit so hard during this coronavirus pandemic.
And that's another thing, Jeff, you just don't know what those outside influences can be on any marketplace. And truthfully, I think that we are really in a good position to do this now as we come out of this pandemic. I mean, obviously, we're seeing some difficult numbers in terms of virus cases and the like, but really going into the 2021 year and beyond, it's very positive and exciting to see New Jersey in a position to start to grow new economies and new sources of revenue here. Because, as you said, there's been a lot of small businesses and some large that have really been negatively impacted, and certainly way too many people are trying to figure out what they're going to do and how to get back into the workplace. So I think this is really good timing.
So here's something I've always wondered about. Is it actually, in general, comfortably profitable to be an owner of a company in the cannabis business? And the reason I ask this is something that I just found out about when we started working on an issue related to this, tax issues. I wonder how profitable they can be when they're not allowed on a federal level and in New Jersey to deduct business expenses, something that, and that's because it's illegal. And here in New Jersey, it's going to be legal. And unless we're able to change it with the legislation we're working on, even though it's legal, you won't be able to deduct, business expenses. So with these kind of obstacles, are companies in this industry, are they really making lots of money, or is it kind of the glamour or new frontier atmosphere of this market that attracts people wanting to invest in it?
I think the truth of the matter is that in different states, you see different experiences by the businesses. The reality is that, you use the word gamble, and I think that's a really good way to look at this, because when you look at the market trends as to where we were 10 years ago and where we are now from a marijuana marketplace, the gamble is working, right? More and more states are legalizing this, and obviously there's an appreciation and a goal to see that it would be done federally. So I think that you have to look at each of those states a little bit differently, but certainly that there is a demand for this product in the marketplace. So I mean, I could give you different stats here and there, but the truth of the matter is that there seems to be a upward trajectory in this market for the businesses that are involved. That doesn't mean that if you populate way too many licenses and you have one on every corner, that you're never going to be able to really see all of them succeed. In places like Colorado, you saw that they opened up a whole bunch of stores and they had to close them because they just couldn't compete with the sort of the mom and pop type of system that they put in place. So I think the answer is yes, that there is a true roadway or map, if you will, to high profits here. I think that's why it's really wise how New Jersey is looking to do this, so that the commission itself can monitor the marketplace and decide when and where the appropriate taxes should go up or should go down based on market trends to ensure that we stay competitive. And I think it's also important that we don't lose sight of the fact that there is an illegal marketplace for this product. And we have to make sure that those taxes do not price out certain communities and places around New Jersey to being able to buy it in the legal marketplace. Right. So I think there's a lot of influences here on the marketplace. But when you look at the states that have done this over a couple of years, the proof's in the pudding that this is a profitable business to get into. But it's not a cheap business to get into.
Right, exactly. Looking at demographics, again, I know there's no sure answers for this, but do you have a sense or a guess, at least maybe, of how much of the market in New Jersey do you think will be, small New Jersey companies? How many do you think will be large New Jersey companies? And any sense of how many, what the segment, the percentage might be of large out-of-state players? Because I know you can see it in Trenton. There are a lot of companies that are from Colorado or wherever that are multi-state and obviously not based in New Jersey. Any sense of how this market will break down?
That responsibility will be on the commission. They certainly have a very difficult job to do, because you see these national firms wanting to come in, and obviously you understand why. It's a small state, highly densely populated, and they believe there's a real marketplace. But I think legislators and advocates have done a good job to ensure that there will be small, women, minority, veteran-owned and operated businesses in the marketplace. So I'm not sure I can give you percentages, but I think that the overall goal is a good one, and that is to make sure that it is a balanced marketplace with New Jersey companies, and making sure that some of those larger companies, that they cannot come in and monopolize and dominate the marketplace.
Getting back to what you were talking about, indirect benefits of legal cannabis industry. Have you seen any, what you would consider reliable estimates of how much economic activity this new market might generate?
The estimate is really in the billions, and
Wow.
I think that comes out to the folks who are going to be employed in this marketplace, and the jobs that they have and how that spreads out in their communities. The fact of the investment. You talk about your downtown area. It's not just downtown. There are warehouses. There's larger places that have seen shifts in the demand for what they're utilized for. So I think that there's a whole bunch of those shoulder marketplaces, if you will, to legalize marijuana that will benefit from this, from real estate, taxes, how the impact to restaurants and social life. I do believe that you're going to see those benefits, and they will reach into the billions.
Well, Kevin, thank you for tolerating my barrage of questions here.
Thank you very much for having me, Jeff. I appreciate it. And, we obviously look forward to continuing to answer questions as they come up. So any way we could be helpful, please let me know.
Now we're going to talk with Melissa Dardani. Melissa is a CPA and is the leader of the Society's Cannabis Interest Group. She developed the proposal that led to the decoupling legislation that I referred to at the beginning of the episode. Welcome, Melissa.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
So, Melissa, can you explain to our listeners just what this decoupling of New Jersey from Internal Revenue Code Section 280E, that's a mouthful, can you explain what that's all about?
Sure. So to take a step back and talk about briefly what 280E is, it is a section of the Internal Revenue Code that basically says legal regulated cannabis businesses are not entitled to take any of their deductions, their ordinary and necessary business expenses to offset their revenue when they're calculating their taxable income. Why that is incredibly important for businesses to consider in the cannabis industry is because when you do not have the benefit of taking those deductions, you could end up with an effective tax rate as high as 70, 80%, sometimes more than that of what you actually earned. So it ends up being a very crippling tax bill for these legal businesses. They're not federally legal, but the states have said they're legal, and now they have this very costly compliance burden on their plates. So that's what 280E is in a nutshell.
Yeah, and even if we are able to decouple here in New Jersey, there's still the federal problem, which is even worse, I would guess, worse of a tax bite than New Jersey's, what New Jersey is doing. Can you tell us a little bit about the Society's legislative efforts on this issue?
Sure. So the NJCPA has put out a proposal to legislatures, to members of the front office, to basically ask them to consider decoupling from 280E for certain small businesses. And what decoupling means is that while the federal law says that this is illegal and therefore businesses are subject to 280E, New Jersey will basically recognize the legality of it within our states, and for tax purposes, when calculating New Jersey taxable income, we will not recognize 280E. So we will allow these businesses to calculate taxable income just as any other business would, without regards to 280E. And to give an advantage to small businesses, which have a very difficult time operating in such an expensive industry, again, for the cost of compliance that we kind of mentioned already, we have proposed that businesses that fall under a certain revenue threshold are those that get the exemption from 280E.
Got it. So, and that's 25 million in aggregate gross receipts, right? Did I get that right? Okay. Now, Melissa, as an aside, I can see you've become such a legislative insider that you actually use the term front office, which is sort of an insider's term for the governor's office. So Melissa is ready, almost ready to become a lobbyist on this issue. She's been very involved in this. So putting aside 280E, can you tell us what else the Society is doing to help members who are interested in serving clients in the cannabis industry?
Yeah, absolutely. Our main focus at the society within the Cannabis Interest Group is education. At this point in time, everything is so uncertain. This is a brand new industry for New Jersey. This is unlike anything that the state has seen, at least in my lifetime. So we are trying to give our members as much education as possible. As accountants, of course, we are concerned with 280E. Because that is the main issue where we can help our clients in the tax arena at least. But there's also a lot of other opportunity to help our clients get themselves set up appropriately, determining which type of entity they might want to be, getting their books and records, their accounting software set up. There's a lot of opportunity for accountants to advise clients in this industry, just as there is in any other industry. We are trusted advisors and our clients rely on us for everything. So at the society, we're trying to give as much education as possible. To that point, we have a couple publications coming out about 280E, about the uncertainty of the sales tax situation for the cannabis market. So be on the lookout for those. We have a couple upcoming webinars, one about employee-employer considerations in light of cannabis legalization. Another is a kind of smorgasbord of legal hot topics that accountants, while we are not attorneys, we should certainly be aware of issues that our clients bring to us that may require an attorney to get involved. So these are some of the educational initiatives we have coming. So stay tuned.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us.
Thanks for having me.
To learn more about the webinars and articles Melissa mentioned, visit njcpa.org/cannabis. And if you're an NJCPA member and are interested in joining the Cannabis Interest Group, visit njcpa.org/groups. And thanks again to Kevin Hagan for sharing his expertise with us. You can learn more about Kevin and the Princeton Public Affairs Group at ppag.com or on Twitter at ppag Inc.